Of the management, faculty, staff and students of the School of Media and Communication at Africa University, I'd like to warmly welcome you to the third in the series of distinguished lectures organized by the school. We'd like to welcome in a most special way the Executive Governor of Ekiti State, His Excellency Dr. Kayode Fayemi, who is going to deliver this third distinguished lecture in the series. Your Excellency, you're most welcome. And we highly appreciate your presence with us today. You're amongst friends. So, Excellencies, I'd like to quickly recognize a number of Could you please rise up for recognition? Communication. We also have Mr. Richard Kayode. Mr. Kayode is the director of the Center for Leadership in Journalism and a senior fellow. We also have Dr. Mike Okolo, academic programs, the SMC. Dr. Bell Moloku, who calls himself Joseph. So Dr. Joseph. Dr. Moloku is also Isa Memo is a distinguished member of faculty. Dr. Nabayado is the head of the Digital and New Media Department. We have Mr. Tommy Vincent, who's also a member of faculty. For the last moment. So I want to introduce to you somebody who needs no introduction, really. And he's the one who's providing, talking about the dean of the school, Professor Emego Biago. I saw Peter watching earlier, yes. Peter is the most victim, and if my check doesn't come in, I have to blame myself. Mr. Isaac is going to make all the recognitions later in the program. For now, I'd like to make my very brief remarks. Any society that does not re-examine itself is as good as dead. So we have instituted this particular lecture series to ensure that we engage society based on a number of contemporary issues and see how we can galvanize that culture of debate so that we can bring about sustainable development. We are joy that we have today the Executive Governor of Ekiti State deliver this third distinguished lecture series. I'd like to at this point invite the Dean of the school, Mr. Biago, to give his welcome address. Thank you.
And I'm going to do this in the spirit of that heart. The Pan-African University is a Christian institution, but it is not a Catholic institution in the sense of founded by the Catholic Church. It's founded by ordinary men and women who got together, inspired by the teachings of the saints. Maria Escriva. And it is coincidental that today is the anniversary of the founding of Opus Dei, this association, under whose inspiration we have an African University. And I'm going to take this opportunity to read a few things that the founder of OPUSE has remarked at the debate when once he attended the graduation ceremony, commencement ceremony of one of the universities that he also inspired, the University of Navarra. From here we draw a lot of inspirations. He says, this is what I've been teaching all the time, using words from Holy Scripture. That the world is not evil because it comes from the hands of God. Because it is His creation. Because Yahweh looked upon it and saw that it was good. It is we ourselves, men and women, who make it evil and outplay with our sins and our unfaithfulness. Don't doubt it, my children. Any attempt to escape from the noble reality of daily life is, for you men and women of the world, something opposed to the will of God. On the contrary, you must realize now, more clearly than ever, that God is calling you to serve in and from the ordinary secular and civil activities of human life. God waits for us every day in the laboratory, in the operating theater, in the army barracks, in the university chair, in the factory, in the workshop, in the fields, including the fields of politics, in the home, and all the immense panorama of work. Understand this well. There is something holy, something divine in the most ordinary situations, and it is up to each one of you to discover it. You have discovered your calling and your service in politics, having been engaged in the struggle for democracy. We have discovered our own calling in teaching and in learning, and as you well know, we are supposed to be engaged on behalf of our country, for the love of our country, in the struggle for democracy, like you. At the School of Media and Communication, we decided that we cannot stay aloof from the life of our country. And the best way to engage this life is to engage it as intellectuals, to engage in the discourse of situations and affairs, of problems, of challenges in our country. And this series is part of that engagement. And in doing this, we believe that we are fulfilling the desire of the man who founded the institution which has inspired us. And so I would like to welcome you very friendly, knowing that in this sense we share the same spirit, the same endeavor to perfect life, to make it better for our people. And I've heard so many good things that you have started to do in Ekiti State in a very short time that you have been there. We'd like to associate ourselves with it. Some of our faculty have been part of that process as well. I'm really pleased that you are here in person to share your experiences of governance with us. So, Vice Chancellor is not present at the moment, so I will use this opportunity to give you a word of welcome from him and to say that this welcome is not only on behalf of the School of Media and Communication, but on behalf of the entire university. Your Excellency, you're welcome.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Let me invite, as Dean said, His Excellency has a very tight schedule today. So I'm going to fast forward and start the citation from page 5. My page 5. Since assuming office in October 16, 2010, the governor has demonstrated uncommon passion and zeal for social justice and service delivery through people-oriented programs like the Social Security Scheme for Elderly, which involves payment of 5,000 stipend to elderly citizens above 65 years old, free education up to senior secondary school level, free health care for the vulnerable, use in commercial agriculture
and development programs and women empowerment. By the way, it's not in your draft. Don't look for it. Through the YCAD, no fewer than 1,500 young people, school leavers, have been employed and empowered with grants, seedlings, and parcels of land. Massive cultivation of rice and cassava have also been embarked upon, while the old farm settlements in various communities have been resuscitated in the bid to reposition the state as the food basket of the nation. Under the Youth Empowerment Scheme, over 5,000 youths have been employed and trained to function in different sectors of the economy. The scheme's target is to create empowerment for 20,000 youths by 2014. Young entrepreneurs are also being encouraged to stand on their own through Young Entrepreneur Scheme, which involves provision of financial grants to them. A prudent manager of men and material, Governor Fayemi, within the first year of being in office, shored up the internally generated revenue of the state from 109 million monthly to over 600 million naira monthly. Governor Kayode Fayemi, through the e-school project, has distributed 33,000 computer laptops to students in public secondary schools in the state and 11,000 computer laptops to teachers in the first phase of the project, which is designed to distribute 100,000 computer laptops. The target is to ensure that every student in the state's public secondary school has a computer by 2014. His administration's huge investment in infrastructure development and other urban renewing programs have changed the face of the state capital, Ekiti, and other major towns in the state through construction of major and feeder roads. In the bid to make tourism a major source of income in the state, the governor has also redeveloped the Kogosi Cold and Warm Spring to a global standard. While his administration's field health program is designed for the vulnerable members of the society, children under the age of 5, pregnant women, physically challenged, and the elderly above 65 have free medical provision, which was designed to take medical care to various communities. So far, no fewer than 450,000 patients have received treatment for different ailments and minor surgeries since the inception of the quarterly medical mission. He is currently involved in a comprehensive renovation of the 183 secondary schools in the state and the purchase of 40,000 units of furniture for teachers and students, a project that cost the government a whopping 2.5 billion naira, but which is giving new meaning to public education in the state. Ekiti State, under the leadership of the governor, has also scored a number of firsts. The first state to domesticate the Freedom of Information Law, first to pass the Social Security Law, first to pass the Gender-Based Violence Prohibition Law, and the first state to put a laptop on the desk of every student in the secondary school under the Computer for Child initiative. In a bid to ensure citizens' participation in governance, he has initiated a regular town hall meeting where each community takes or makes input to the policies of government. Part of this is the annual town hall meeting. It gets a monthly stipend of 5,000. He has also gone a step further by giving it a legislative backing through the Social Security law duly passed by the State Assembly. As at date, over 20,000 indigent elderly citizens benefit from this scheme every month. In recognition of the several innovations he has brought to governance, the leadership newspaper group named the governor of the year in 2011. Mr. Dean, distinguished lecturers, students, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I therefore have the singular honor to present a dynamic, certainly vibrant, articulate, hardworking, energetic, intelligent, brilliant, results-oriented, focused, committed, passionate, amiable, visionary leader and achiever, His Excellency Dr. John Kayode Fayemi.
Created by that generous remarks by my senior in the industry, Mr. Ekiti. The Dean of the faculty, distinguished faculty members, students of the School of Media and Communications, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First, let me start by apologizing. I had intended to be here for the entire day because I knew I was going to speak to a small audience that would have provided for better interaction. But you know, when you are in a position like this, you often don't own your time. And this is a political season in the Southwest. In another hour or two, I'm due in Ikare, Akoko for a campaign. That is why I have to split myself between being here, since I promised to honor this invitation. And I know Fumi Ajala and a couple of other people among you here would kill me if I don't show up here. But at the same time, I have to show up at the other end. But I'm really delighted to be here. And delighted for a number of reasons. I'm here standing on the shoulders of giants. Many of the giants are here. I was telling Engineer Majuka earlier that I grew up in Ibadan as a young child, knowing his great work in the pre-NTA, not NTA. Well, everybody knows the NTA days now. I'm not suggesting that he's a Methuselah, but just to let you know that he has come a long way. And then, of course, I was telling the Dean that when he was on the editorial board of The Guardian, I used to read him habitually. I haven't been a reporter in The Guardian myself in my early life. I always feel greatly honored when asked to speak and share ideas within the hallowed precincts of academia, as this is one of the most privileged of spaces in which one can venture one's thoughts and reflections and experience the benefit of giving this fellowship in the Fellowship of Intellectuals, eminent faculty, and scholars, as well as distinguished alumni and students. This is the original space in which ideas are leavened and honed before being given life to in the applied world of public political office. And I feel very privileged to have the academia as a primary constituency from which I am continuously equipped to engage with the brutal realm of the transformation of acquired as well as processed information. I really would like to thank the School of Media and Communications of the Pan-African University for considering me worthy of giving the third in its series of distinguished lectures hinged on the business of government and public service, which I have dedicated the most potent of my abilities and energies to in the past couple of years, and to which I am committed to making a fundamentally progressive difference within the period in which my skills are on offer and requested. And coming here, I took pains to talk to the two previous speakers what to expect. I called my chairman in the Governor's Forum who had been here before me, Governor Rotimi Amechi, as well as the Governor of Delta State, and asked them to give me a few tips what to expect, and whether I was coming to a theater where I would be treated with kids' gloves, or receive friendly fire, or treated with absolute ignominy. And they told me that I really shouldn't have anything to fear coming here. So I'm delighted to be here. I've always been of the conviction that public service is the highest form of duty that anyone can offer within the human community, and thus the quality of leadership that is available to society in the public sphere at the critical points in its history always determines the quality of human life, experience, and values that such society propagates and supports. As we must all be aware, this great country of ours, 52 years yesterday, is a robust and heavily laden trove of human and material resources, which is possibly second to none in sub-Saharan Africa. Yet, our reality is defined by existential challenges that evolve from and are compounded by the caliber of the managers of our public sphere and institutions in the past 5 decades. These were actors who pandered to the logic of various special interests, largely narrow, primordial, and ultimately self-serving, to create an ethos in which governance refrained from serving the good of the greater number of our people. However, the business of the state has always been very serious business, as the state is essentially a cultural expression that holds together the modern diversity of people and ways of life. And any framework that would regulate and enhance this diversity has to be one that is constituted in a very serious and conscious manner, in a way that guarantees a common purpose for citizens and residents. In the past 5 decades, as I have alluded to, Nigeria went through processes of government and governance that assumed the character and hue of the state actors directing its affairs, from the focused and organized pioneers of the 1950s into the early 60s, to the volatile and inept figures who led the country through the 70s and the early 1980s, and the morally reprehensible lot that ruled towards the dawn of the Fourth Republic in 1999. As such, whilst we set out as a country on a somewhat progressive footing under the founding fathers, the reversals that we experienced, mainly from the implosions that arose within the polity and the incursion of authoritarian rule alongside its civilian inflections, enthroned the paradigm of government and public governance that coalesced around waste, bureaucratic inefficiency, red tapeism, and certainly corrosive corruption. Thenceforth, the business of government and the state no longer was, and neither did it pretend to be, about providing a life more abundant or social and human security for the good of the greater number of our people. What about big business for those who had access to the, by then, centralized resources of the state and its apparatuses? Thereafter, we witnessed how the state became more and more unitary, and how the contest for the privileges of the center took on an increasingly desperate tenor among the different groups and stakeholders in our country. While corruption and state exclusion thrived, several groups began to feel a sense of alienation, leading to the desertion of a sense of national citizenship and affiliation to the state, which they subsequently considered as being merely a contraption, a geographical expression to be exploited for individual gain, and a cake, many refer to it as a national cake, that everyone needed to grab a share of. Thus, whatever could be taken out of the center, more so illegally, was considered acceptable and just within the perception of primordial local interests. This is what is aptly described by the political sociologist Peter Ekiti in his insightful article, Colonialism and the Two Publics in Africa, that the nature of the state in post-colonial Africa, with one part of the state, the primordial part, being exclusive and the civic public being inclusive. While the initial public is the national one that inspires exploitation, the latter is the local and the native one of ethnic affiliation that instigates loyalty and protection across the different groups. And when politicians who justify corruption through the support they give in their community explain themselves, they're referring to that public that is primordial, away from that public that is supposed to be patriotic and national. Without going into detailed theoretical or technical arguments about the nature of the state in post-colonial Africa, we need to situate the historical, structural, and ideological dynamics that likely determine the nature of state that we inherited and still operates. The state in Africa, including the Nigerian state, has likely been a generator and a propagator of injustice, inequality, and regression. Whereas the fundamental basis of the new paradigm of statehood that emerged from the modern European state after the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648 was to ensure the generation and propagation of full development and common good within and beyond the emerging sovereign states. The state in much of Africa, for the most accounts, has produced the reversal of the key goals of the formation and function of the modern state. This disappointing reality has its basis in the colonial experience, which led to the founding of the modern state in Africa. The modern state in Africa evolved from exploitation, from domination, from subjugation and subjection. From the era of transatlantic slave trade to the period of colonialism, Africa's encounter with Europe, which led to the imposition of the modern state, was largely defined by an exploitative hegemonic relationship. The different modes of domination which the new Leviathan, that is the colonial state, imposed on Africa, led to new modes of production and reproduction. These new modes of production and reproduction were directly tied to sustaining and elaborating the European modes of domination of African societies and the people of the continent. Understandably, the foreign imposition and the new supreme institution of political rule that was brought to place, that is the modern state, was approached by Africans both as an alien construct and as an alien body of practices. The alienation was primarily the result not just of the foreignness of the modern state that was grafted upon African societies, but the consequence of the absence of original legitimacy. The colonial state lacked original legitimacy, which could only be the result of the consent of the ruled. It lacked de jure legitimacy. What it had was de facto legitimacy. However, because the colonial state had legitimacy in fact, it was able to create de jure legitimacy for itself, despite using a circuitous route to achieve legitimacy by the law, because that legitimacy was a self-legitimating type which was not obtained through the consent of the government. The colonial state, though having power and eventually authority, still lacked authorization, or what we might call right. It possessed what the Italian Marxian theorist Antonio Gramsci called hegemony. But the colonial state was only able to gradually induce the non-forcible form of hegemony through the excess of the forcible form of hegemony, which was pure domination through guns and bayonets. While Africans had little or no power to successfully resist the external imposition of the modern state, they developed a repertoire of forms of resistance, some of which have become impediments to the consolidation of the power, the rights and duties of the modern state in the post-colonial era. It must be emphasized that consent is at the heart of understanding the dynamics of the colonial state and the challenges that it faced and that its successor state, the post-colonial state, has faced. Some respected scholars, both African and Africanist scholars, have attempted to explain the nature of the African state and the implications of the nature of this state for the contemporary challenges faced by Africans in the context of public governance. What has the nature of state formation got to do with the enormous predicaments of the contemporary state and public governance in Africa in general, and in Nigeria in particular? Perhaps, as I've already cited, Peter Eke presents a very interesting argument about how colonialism in Africa has led to what he calls a unique historical configuration in modern post-colonial Africa. He describes the uniqueness of this historical formation as the existence of two publics instead of the one public in the Euro-American West. Eke analyzes the historical evolution of the public in modern times and concludes that the distinction between the public and the private realm constitutes one of the distinctive elements of modern politics. Hence, the erosion of the state as a means of enabling the greater good of people in society, occurring in tandem with the institutionalization of corruption, led to the promotion of a paradigm of governance that considered public office as a vehicle for the primitive accumulation and appropriation, as well as apportioning of resources that ought to belong to the Commonwealth. Therefore, the state became privatized, and its processes were characterized by closure and clientelist notion of patronage, as the business of the state centered on the dispensation of favors between those who had privatized public resources and their coterie of fixers, their thugs, hangers-on, lackeys, and retainers. The constitutive lack of overriding consent and all deep loyalty in respect of the state in Africa and our country, Nigeria, specifically has not been expressed only by social theorists and scholars such as Peter Eke, whom I have cited here. It has also been expressed elaborately by the founding fathers of Nigeria in their struggles to define or control the business of state and public governance. You are familiar with many of these different expressions of what constitutes or what should constitute Nigeria by those who held critical positions during Nigeria's transition from a colonial to a post-colonial state. From the readings of the Zik of Africa, of Afemi Awolowo, Sagana, Amadu Bello, you can find very copious examples of this. However, what is most evident is that most prominently at the national level, the Nigerian post-colonial state has not behaved in a fundamentally different way from the colonial state itself. Even though operated by Nigerians, natives this time, the post-colonial state has been as alien and as predatory as its colonial predecessor. As the late Professor Claude Ake, Africa's foremost political theorist, argued in the early 1990s, this legacy has its roots in the colonial era, when political discourse excluded not only democracy, but even the idea of good governance, and politics was reduced to the clash of one exclusive claim to power against another. This attitude persisted even after Africa gained political independence. By deciding to take over the colonial system instead of transforming it in accord with popular nationalist aspirations, most African leaders found themselves on a collision course with their people. The question therefore is, how can the business of the state be serious business in a context in which public governance is largely a predatory exercise, in which power is captured from citizens and not freely given by citizens, a context in which the consent of the people is not integral to the constitutional legitimacy? Wouldn't such a context be a form of internal colonialism? Is the post-colonial state, in effect, a form of internal colonial state? What are the implications of these questions for the push to the creation of a new paradigm of public governance? In reality, as evident from objective experiences, the Nigerian state is one that is disdainful of its citizens and does not trust them. The citizens of Nigeria equally are disdainful of the Nigerian state too, and have little or no trust in it. Also, the Nigerian state, as demonstrated by its operators, does not trust the judgment of its citizens. This is why its operators cannot even trust the electorate to elect their leaders. Therefore, the operators of the Nigerian state often decide to select a selectorate which is regularly substituted for the electorate and which delivers fake electoral victories to the key operators of the Nigerian state. It is no wonder that when election approaches, they stockpile guns and fake ballots rather than mobilize for votes. As a commentator said, tongue-in-cheek, elections are too sensitive a matter to be left to the electorate, or so the key operators of the Nigerian state believe. As someone who has been a victim of this process I'm describing, I can tell you that when this electorate confronts the electorate, only a determined people and an impartial, upright, and conscientious judiciary can save you. Unfortunately, such a judiciary is now uncommon, and where it exists, the state pummels it, it intimidates it, it harasses it into submission. Distinguished faculty, students, guests, ladies and gentlemen, let us leave aside for a while some of the questions I've raised in the last section, which speak directly to the nature of the African state, indeed the Nigerian state. I will return to some of these later. What I would like to do is examine three critical elements at the core of making the business of state a serious business. These three elements are also essential to public governance. However, in the concluding part of my lecture, I will point to how to transform these three elements from being only essential to public governance to becoming part of the agencies of creating a new paradigm of public governance in Nigeria. I have argued earlier for the centrality of consent and legitimacy in the creation and sustenance of the modern state, and how the absence of the two not only raises fundamental questions about the nature of any state, the absence in our specific experience in Africa has also turned the state into the biggest and most complex generator and propagator of injustice. How can this reality be reversed at the level of governance, that is, at the Marxian epiphenomena level? At the center of making the business of state a serious business are three elements that I consider to be key. The first is political leadership. The second is the bureaucracy, while the third is public communication, in which you are experts. At the receiving end of the chain that connects these three are the targets of the three, the people, our citizens. The three, as I stated earlier, are critical elements of public governance. Whereas for many years, government was defined as the activity or process of governing, or a condition of ordered rule, which could also be substituted for governance. In recent years, government is no longer treated as a synonym of governance. Governance currently indicates a significant change in the meaning of government and a new process of governing. With the experience of unprecedented social, economic, and political challenges in the late 20th century, scholars, social thinkers, statesmen, public and private managers, and the international and local development agencies realize that the traditional understanding and the habitual enterprise of government were insufficient to confront these challenges. Therefore, governance was conceived as the principle and practice of governing in a more complex and a more networked world. A principle and practice which produce better and decentralized capacities for coping with demographic revolution, economic decline, technological opportunities, and the potential harm in a global age. Governance has come to mean a cooperative form of government by networks of public and private actors who participate in a negotiated decision and in implementation. It is opposed to the traditional hierarchical model of government, which is seen as unable to overcome its innate inefficiency and lack of transparency. When it first emerged in the late 20th century, governance was initially tied to the neoliberal rolling back of the state project, spearheaded by the Bretton Woods institutions, the World Bank, and the IMF, and other international development agencies. The mantra of the project was that greater emphasis should be placed on individual choice and markets allocating resources. The rolling back of the state involved market deregulation, privatization, desubsidization, and customer-driven models of public service delivery. While there are some benefits in the neoliberal conception of the citizen as customer, such as increasing public sector efficiency and responsiveness towards individual choice and preferences. However, as John Pear argues, this approach also distorts a delicate and sensitive system of mutual entitlements and obligations between the state and the individual, while opening up the possibility of inequalities between individuals, which essentially run counter to the equal and universalistic entitlements and obligations associated with citizenship. Therefore, some have proposed that what is needed is not so much customer-based models of public service as a reaffirmation of the legal, social, and political dimension of citizenship. Therefore, we need to interrogate whether we are citizens or whether we're subjects in the Nigerian state. Therefore, the state also remains the most important mechanism of ensuring collective direction for the society and protecting and projecting the common purpose. Against this backdrop, therefore, I will argue that political leadership is a major determinant of good governance. While there is an unending debate, both scholarly and lay, on the one hand about the relationship of the elite or leaders and the mass of the people, and on the other hand, on which of the two overdetermine the direction of the state and society, I would like to advance the primacy of leadership in modern public governance without going into the intricacies of this debate. The African experience, among others, has shown that the quality, the vision, patriotism, and competence of the political leadership is critical to the transformation of African states and the possibilities of good public governance. In our specific experience in Nigeria, while much of our history is defined by bad leadership and bad governance, we also have a few experiences of how the quality of leadership has produced such an excellent system of public governance, which had implications far beyond the era of that excellent governance. I can readily give the example of the government of Western region of Nigeria between 1955 and 1960. The quality of the cabinet, the vision of the leadership, and the great task that they set for themselves and achieved totally transformed the Western region into an area of Africa with one of the highest concentration of educated people within a period of only 5 years, from Lagos all the way down to Asaba. The leaders took the business of state as serious business and showed that they wanted to change the social, economic, and political conditions of the region forever. The free and compulsory education scheme, which were complemented by other programs in the areas of agriculture, housing, social welfare, created a new paradigm of public governance, which became an example for the rest of the country and the continent, which is still talked about till today. Some of us are proud heirs of this tradition of excellent leadership and outstanding public governance. Since we got into office in Ekiti State, we have been working hard to recreate this paradigm of public governance that takes the business of state as serious business. It has not been an easy task for those of us who practically inherited basket cases. Some of us are successors to administrations which had little or no value for the responsibilities of public governance. Such bad leadership, therefore, is illustrative in the reverse of the critical role of leadership in ensuring that the business of the state is taken far more seriously. The second critical element is the bureaucracy. Again, I will go back to the past to illustrate this. The exceptional quality of public governance in the old Western region under the lives of the late Chief Adebo that I just referenced would have been impossible but for the quality of that bureaucracy. The success of the Western region was based not only on the quality of the vision of its political leaders, but also on the quality of the service rendered by the civil service that implemented the decisions of the political leaders. Perhaps the same can be said in terms of the relationship of the quality of the public policy processes and public service delivery and political leadership in the other regions of our country during that period. Beyond the First Republic, though, students of Nigeria's public administration are also aware of the quality of the federal civil service, which led to the era of the super permanent secretaries, the ASIODUs, the DAMSIDES, and several others of that era. There are many who still insist that the civil service in Nigeria was destroyed by the ill-advised and indiscriminate purge executed by General Murtala Mohammed regime in the mid-70s. Since then, many attempts at the reform of the civil service in Nigeria has led to a Nigerian civil service that has not been able to match the excellence, the efficiency and effectiveness and professionalism of its earliest beginning. I'm arguing, therefore, for the central role, the pivotal role of the bureaucracy in ensuring that the business of state is serious business, because going back to its earliest origins in Western Europe and the articulation of its purposes by European thinkers, the rationality that is integral to the idea and practices of the bureaucracy constitutes the very foundations of the modern nation state and public governance. It has been argued that political modernity and bureaucracy are largely symbiotic, and that the rise of the modern state parallels the rise of the bureaucracy. In the earlier Westphalian era to which I referred at the start of this lecture, Adam Smith's defense of the division of labor promoted bureaucratization. This also influenced one of the most important theorists of bureaucracy, Max Weber. Weber suggests that bureaucracy be a rational legal form designed to promote the rationalization of organizational tasks and goals. The rationality of the bureaucracy, as Weber argues, has two aspects to it. One is that it maximizes technical efficiency, which clearly defined roles with clearly defined roles which direct the behavior of members in the most efficient way. 2 is that it is a system of control which is accepted by members on the basis that they view the rules as rational, impartial, and fair, known as the legal rational system. The role of political leadership, working hand in hand with the civil service to produce a new paradigm of public governance in the developing world, is most excellently demonstrated in the case of Singapore under Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew. Yew was convinced that political leadership and the bureaucracy had a vested interest in the very viability of Singapore as a democratic state, and a shared responsibility to translate the People's Action Party's plans, development into reality. The man who can be described as the founder of modern Singapore told the civil servants in 1959, and I quote him, that if we do not do our best, then we will have only ourselves to blame. When the people lose faith, not just you in the public service and we, the democratic political leadership, but also in the democratic system of which you and I are working parts. In establishing a developmental state, Lee Kuan Yew and his colleagues saw rapid economic development as a means of surviving as a sovereign state and society and building national identity. Today, we are all witnesses to the success of that cooperation between the political leadership and bureaucracy in Singapore. In terms of purchasing power parity, Singapore has the 3rd highest per capita income in the world. Its population is about half of the population of Lagos State, but Singapore is the world's 4th leading financial center, and its port is one of the 5 busiest ports in the world. In the 2012 Index of Economic Freedom, Singapore ranked number 2. Nigeria ranked number 116. If the business of government must be serious business, then we need to pay attention to the quality of civil service. We can start by asking what happened to the quality, efficiency, and effectiveness of the civil service of the Adebo and Asiodu era. These days, civil service job has become the last resort for those who cannot find jobs in the banks, in the oil and gas sector, and in other so-called lucrative careers. Something must be done about this. We cannot raise the quality of public governance if we do not raise the quality of the civil service. Therefore, we must recognize and implement the main thrust of the recent push for public service reform around the world so as to strengthen the managing capacity of public servants. This includes the recognition that government must become more facilitative and catalytic and involved in steering rather than rowing. It involves re-examination of government's involvement in economic activities, concern about results and result orientation, the emphasis taken from input to performance, the need to be customer-driven, providing quality service at all times, the decentralization of decision-making so as to improve service delivery, transparency, greater levels of accountability in public management, and concern for value for money by taxpayers. The last of the 3 critical elements is public communication. It must be said that the best effort of good political leadership and an efficient, effective, and professional bureaucracy would not lead to good governance if there is no effective and efficient system of public communication. If the people, that is, the citizens, are the targets of public policies, then there must be mutual communication between the government and the governed. Public communication involves the articulation of public interest, which is indispensable in a democratic polity. It is the means by which the citizens will hold their government accountable, and it is the means by which the government will demonstrate its trust in the wisdom of the people in a democratic process. If citizenship is defined as active and informed participation in public affairs and the political process, while governance constitutes a cooperative form of government by networks, as I earlier defined, then it's clear that good public governance is impossible without efficient and effective communication with the citizens. On the whole, for the state to maintain its legitimacy and attract the continued consent of the people, there is the need for a political leadership with a vision, a leadership that is committed to social transformation and development, a leadership that regards public offices as a trust rather than a right. There is also a need for a bureaucracy that is efficient, effective, and professional, and yet is able to partner with the political leadership to create a new society in which the citizens realize the greatest benefits of the rationale for the creation and sustenance of the modern nation state. And it is thought imperative that democratic, resourceful, and sophisticated means of public communication must constitute the very lifeblood of public governance. Much of what I've said might sound theoretical. Let me now relate it to how it comes into a full relief with the work we're doing in Ekiti State. Clearly, the old and erstwhile paradigm of public governance evolved with the backward slide and decline of the business of government into a self-serving, opportunistic, and crassly corrupt level, with the resources of the state being privatized and dispensed in a free will. When I decided to go into partisan politics from a life of activism, it was because the state had become a threat to its citizens in Ekiti. And I want you to cast your mind back to Ekiti State in 2005, 2006, and recall what you were reading in your newspapers about Ekiti State during that period. This was the era of a gentleman known as Fayemi as governor. And all over the state, including those who were detached observers of what was going on in the state, the question on the lips of every concerned Nigerian was, what has happened to you in Ekiti? We thought you were the knowledgeable, smart, literate, intellectual section of Nigerians. Where did you get this person from? How did you arrive at this point? What are the rest of you doing about this? This was the swan song across the country. So at the time, some of us considered the business of the state and government has been too serious to be left in the hands of drifters, charlatans, brigands, looters, and opportunists. We knew that a new paradigm of public governance had to be enthroned in order to arrest the restiveness that was fermenting across the land, and in the effort to unlock the potentials of the state so that it could attain its manifest destiny. Our objective was not so much an attempt to completely reinvent the wheel, but to empower the reamplification of that earlier model of purposeful government in the old western region that I described earlier, that was pioneered by the late Chief Fayemi and his colleagues between the 1950s and 60s. And to also enable a mode of governance that is essentially participatory and characterized by enduring interactions and dialogue between the government and the people. Many of you here must be aware of the prolonged struggle we embarked on to recover the political mandate that our people had lawfully and freely given to us on April 14, 2007. Of course, that prolonged struggle took 3.5 years, culminating in my being sworn in office on October 16, 2010. Thus, as an indication of a new paradigm of public governance that our experience in Ekiti signifies, the sanctity of the electoral process needs to be entrenched and protected, as this is the very basis by which the legitimacy of the social contract with the people is secured and accountability from the government can be demanded. When the people freely choose their leaders that are accountable to them, the business of government as working for the greater good of the people is taken very seriously. And this begins with a very critical definition of the political, social, and economic goals that would have the most significant positive impact on the lives of the people of the state. The vision that we campaigned upon was key to our electoral triumph, as it resonated loudly with citizens and residents throughout the 16 local governments of Ekiti State. Our intention in seeking office was and is expressly articulated in a statement of purpose and a mission codified as an 8-point agenda. And it was and remains to make poverty history in our state. This is apparently the most serious dimension of the social rescue endeavor, since it encapsulates the blueprint for good governance. In our administration, whilst recognizing the peculiarity of our circumstances and geography, we set out with the vision of making poverty history, enhancing participatory and accountable governance, targeted as leading to social and economic growth and progress, infrastructural development to improve the lives of the people and attract investments to the state, the modernization of agriculture to create wealth and human-centered development, the improvement of education and enhancement of human capital in a manner that is ICT compliant and inclusive of initiatives for the challenged sectors of the populace. Also, our agenda includes the provision of adequate and accessible healthcare services which are free for minors, seniors, pregnant women, the jump-starting of industrial development, the growing of the tourism corridor, and the promotion of gender equality and women empowerment. These developmental objectives, which are presently being realized through a series of well-formulated and carefully implemented programs, some of which Mr. Kayode referred to earlier, intended to accelerate the economic and social advantages of our people.